Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi, Meiser Sheni, Pedig Dalid, Halacha Vav. We are actually in middle of Halacha Vav. We're learning today Daf Mem Gimel. We are already 13 lines from the top of the Amid, more or less in middle of the Amid, the middle of the Mishnah. We just finished the Machlokes in the Mishnah when you have the word Korban spelled out on a utensil, Korban meaning Hegdish. So Rabbi Yehuda says that if the keli is very inexpensive, it's pottery, klei cheres, then we are to assume that the word korban is describing the contents of the keli. Actually, the keli itself should be viewed as chulin. The contents are hegdish. If the keli has value, as an example, if the keli is made out of metal, then we say the opposite. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. Then we say that korban is a description of the keli itself. But it doesn't mean that its contents are also hegdish. We can assume that they're not. The Chachamim argue with Rabbi Yehuda. By the metal case, the Chachamim hold that when korban is written out on the metal keli, both the keli and the contents are kodesh. That's where we left off. We're going to start today with the part of the Mishnah that's going to continue to tell you how are we to interpret a keli that has a single letter written on it, not the word korban, not the entire word meiser or truma, etc., a single letter. Now, make no mistake, the Mishnah is going to go here through this letter means this, the other letter means something else. What do we do with that? You have to refer back to the Machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim. So let's say if we're going to, the Mishnah says the letter Kuf is taka to be understood as korban. Well, what will the halacha be now? Well, it depends. If it's a klei cheres, if it's a klei mateches, le Rabbi Yehuda le Chachamim. But we're going to speak about single letters. By the way, we're going to have today a braisa that will give other meanings to the same letters in the Mishnah. But that won't be brought in our Mishnah. The Mishnah doesn't go into a machlokes here in the Mishnah. Mishnah will tell you what every letter means. And then the Mishnah will go on to tell us, Shitas Rebbe Yosi, not only does he not accept that a letter like Taf doesn't mean it's Truma. Taf can be in the first letter of a person's name, as can be Kuf, as can be Mem, as can be Shin. So it doesn't, you can't interpret it to mean Truma, Meiser, Kodesh, etc. Not only that, Rabbi Yehuda holds that even if you have the entire word, let's say Meiser or Truma spelled out, the whole word Truma, Tana Rabbi Yosi, yeah, in the past, there was Truma in the Keli. How do you know that it's currently Truma? Could be, there used to be Truma in the Keli, that was eaten, or that was removed, and it was replaced with Chulin. It's amazing. We're going to elaborate a lot more with Shitas Rabbi Yosi, and nothing can be proved. Actually, the Gemara will give you a case in where Rabbi Yosi will be moided to the Chachamim. That when you have the word Meiser spelled out, yes, it means that currently now it is Meiser. The Mishnah will also speak about the case where Meiser Sheni coins were left in one corner in a certain amount. That exact amount is found in another corner. Whether we say that since it's the same amount, is it Meiser? Or since it's not in the same location, we're going to assume that it's not Meiser. In other words, we're going to see how location is consequential. Based on that, we're going to have in the Gemara a phenomenal question. What happens, I'll speak out the case. You have a box. In the box, there was a black wallet. And in the black wallet, you had, let's say, 100 zuz that you know is Meiser Sheni. You go back into the box. In the same place in the box, you find a white wallet with the same quantity. In other words, if location is consequential, which it is, maybe it's so consequential that even if the color of the wallet is different, we can say, since we knew that in this place in the box, there was Meiser Sheni, so whatever is found in the same place in the box is also Meiser Sheni, or not, obviously, or in 1 second. The Meiser Sheni was left in a black wallet. You find it in a white wallet. That will be a question the Gemara is going to have, and we're going to come to an understanding based on a Mishnah in Beitza. The Mishnah in Beitza is speaking about the laws of Muksa, even though one is allowed to shecht on Yom Tiv, but there is an issue with Muksa, which is resolved by the owner of the animal or of the bird designating that animal to be slaughtered on Yom Tiv. And the whole Mishnah that if you had 2 doves that were black and you designated them that they are going to be eaten on Yom Tov. So there's no muktzah issue. You come back to your dovecot, to your chicken coop, and those two birds, it's two birds, but they're white. And we're going to make a correlation from how the Mishnah paskins over there to our inquiry over here, and much more. It's a Gavaldik Daf, Daf Mem Gimel, Amud Aleph, again, 13 lines from the top of the Mishnah. So after we discussed the machloikas between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim, that when you have the whole word spelled out, even there, whether it only refers to the keli, whether it only refers to the contents, whether it refers to both, once we quoted that machloikas, now we're going to continue. What are we to do if there's only one letter, one ois on a keli? So let's go. Hamoitze keli, you find the utensil, the cause of aleph kuf, and all you have written on it is the letter kuf. Says the Mishnah that the letter kuf is the first letter of the word carbon. And it's as if the word carbon is written on the keli. Again, and now what? Well, now it depends. According to Rabbi Yehuda, we say that if the keli is cheres, then the keli itself is not hegdish. It's only the contents are hegdish. And if the keli is made out of a material more chashuv, the Mishnah's example is mateches. So let's go with that. I'm saying that because I'm wondering what would be if it's a clay eitz, what will be if it's a clay even. I don't know, but let's go into the two cases of the Mishnah. Klei cheres, hu chulin, umashu b'toichei karbon. If it's mateches, hu karbon, umashu b'toichei chulin. The Chachamim say that even if it's made out of mateches, and therefore the keli itself is to be understood as hegdish, not only is the keli hegdish, so are its contents. So I don't want to go back to that. Point is, kuf means carbon. If you find a utensil and on it you have the letter mem written, mem, so says the Mishnah, mem means meiser. Now I want people to know that meiser shloime means meiser sheni. And the kasha is, why? Why don't we say, mem is meiser, maybe it's meiser ishain, maybe it's meiser ani? And the answer is very important. The answer is that think about what is the difference between meiser sheni versus meiser ishain and or meiser ani. Meiser ishain, we paskin is chulin. In other words, once it's gifted to a Levi, even a Yisrael can eat it. The Levi can sell it to a Yisrael. Meiser ani is chulin. You are mechuyev to give it to an ani. The ani can go share it with you. The ani can sell it to you. Meiser sheni is not chulin. And therefore, since Meiser Sheni has also a Kedusha element in it, which limits its consumption, not only about who owns it, but you can own it. You can only eat it in Yerushalmi and HaKodesh. It makes a lot more sense that if people are concerned to make sure that no one mistakes this food with something that's chulin, they would take a right hegdish. They would write truma. Mem would mean Meiser Sheni. Because the owner, I'm not minimizing the theft aspect of if it's Meiser Ani, I'm not allowed to eat it. I know that. But since we don't know whether it's Meiser Ani or Meiser Sheni, it makes more sense that by Meiser Sheni, let's say there's a double concern. There's a Ben Adam Lachaverei and a Ben Adam Lamakim. There is an Isur involved over here, and that's why indeed, just to know, whenever you read in the Mishnah, Meiser Stam means Meiser Sheni, doesn't mean Meiser Ish. Okay, if you have the letter Dalid, only Dalid written, so our Mishnah says Demai. Our Mishnah says Demai. Now, what's interesting over here is that the Rashi really on the bottom, the right column, 5 lines from the bottom, Demai, meaning that they were peiros that were lekuchim ma'am haaretz. And as we learned, Mesechtas Demai, the dinam of Demai, you have to separate Meiser Rishon from it, Trumas Meiser. You keep the Meiser Rishon. You have to separate Meiser Sheni. Okay. However, says that Asherilio, Ubepedek Hoisha Shalom, that's Bavli Yevamis, Kuf Tezvav, Kosuv, B'chol Hasfarim, meaning in all of the different Gemaras that the Asherilio had of Mesechtes Bavli, he had our Mishnah recorded, but Edalid, and the Mishnah in his version in the Bavli wrote, Dimua. Dimua means when you have a mixture of Chulin and Truma where there wasn't a ratio of 100 to 1, therefore, the truma was not batel. On the other hand, we don't say the whole thing is truma, but the whole thing may only be eaten by a kohen. That's the meaning of the muah. So just to know that in our Mishnah, Dalad is the Mai. In the Bavli, in the Mishnah, Dalad is the Muah. I want to add something. We will see in the Gemara brings a Braisa that goes through the letters, giving you different meanings of the letters. There are many arguments between the Braisa and the Mishnah, including in Dalad. And actually, there's a pasuk in Parshas Mishpatim, Meleyascha v'dimacha loisa acher. If you learn Chitas, you'll remember Meleyascha means bikurim, Rashi says. Dimacha means truma. So the Braisa that we're going to learn today says Dalid is truma. Straightforward truma. How amazing is that? Dalid might mean demai. I'm going to give you the same logic we just gave before by the letter mem. In other words, whenever it can have two meanings, we're going to understand it to mean that which is more chamur, in which there is a graver violation if someone will eat it without knowing what it is. No doubt, truma is a lot more stringent, right, than demai. Demai midoraisa is allowed to be consumed. Truma midoraisa is chayiv misa b'dei shamayim. But anyways, our version in our Mishnah, in the Yerushalmi, is that Dalad means demai. Tes, the meaning of Tes is tevel. Tov, the meaning of Tov is truma. Now, what the Mishnah is saying now, just for the record, doesn't only refer to Tov. Why Rabbeinu HaKadosh wrote it by Tov, I don't know. But listen to first what the Rabbi writes. First of all, Rabbi is writing, like one can counter against all these letters. Why are you teaching the letter? Now, I don't know what else it could mean, even though we'll see in the Mishnah. The Mishnah, Rabbi Yossi says it means the name of a person. Why are you saying that it means something holy? So you should just know the fact. The fact is that whenever there was religious persecution, if someone was caught being observant, they would get into horrible legal trouble, sometimes killed, Rahman al-Islam. So to avoid them being caught, they would hide. How would they hide it? They would write a letter, and then they would give a teretz that Tov means it's the name of a person. That's what they would say. So what my point is that the Rebbe isn't only speaking about B'shas HaSakana Tov is tachas truma, B'shas HaSakana Tes is tachas tevel, Dalad is tachas demai. It goes on all of the items that were mentioned in the Mishnah. And let me go even further. Bizman Bayesheni, the Sakana ended with the Nes of Chanukah. Maybe not during that year, but at some point afterwards, there were many, many battles. There was independence until when the Romans came. Then the Shas HaSakana started even worse under the Roman dominion of the Holy Land. Point is that once it became common practice for people to only write a letter, instead of writing Truma, they wrote Tov. Even after the Sakana ended, it became normal that you would write Tov. So just to make that clear, it's not only that B'shas HaSakana do we say that Tov means Truma or Tes means Tevel. No, that's just how it began. And that's the way it stays, even if there's no longer a Shas HaSakana. At Kan Tanakama. Rabbi Yossi Omer, I disagree with you. Now, really, Rabbi Yossi has a two-step disagreement. He's going minakal alakovet. First, he's going to a single letter. He's saying when you find a keli and on it there is a letter and there's food in it, who are you to interpret the letter to mean, like we just said, truma, tevel, demai? No, maybe the letter is the name of the owner. V'kulam shemais adamein. Pashit, kuf, kahas, chveis. You have a mem. Mem is Moshe. I mean, why not? Dalet, Daniel. The Gabe likes that. I don't know. Every letter. Huh? You like it too. There we go. I'm sorry. Danny. So the point is that you have to begin. No, but what's the premise over here? The onus of proof. Let me go like this. Roy foods are chulin. Why are you going and telling me that there's a certain limitation? Prove it. A letter is not a proof. Now, don't make a mistake. Once you go with that, with what? That that when you find a container filled with food, you have to prove that it's consecrated food. It's not enough, let's say, circumstantial evidence. Once you go with that logic, which Rabbi Yossi does, now we're going to extend it all the way. You know what all the way means? Even if you have the word truma spelled out, weiter Amar Rabbi Yossi, afilu matzah chavius v'hi melea peiros, and because of aleha, not tough, not only tough. Even if the word truma spelled out, says Rabbi Yossi, harei elu chulin, I'm still going to tell you that its contents are chulin. Why? Sha'ani oimer, because I argue, that's a great argument. Whenever the owner wrote the word truma, indeed, the contents were truma. Yes, those contents were already given to a kohen. Those contents were already removed. Now the balabas has new produce, chulin, and he filled the keli up with the produce. So just because the word truma is written on it, how do you know that this is the product for which he wrote the label? How common is it today, even in the world where there's so much abundance, thank you Hashem, that you have a keli and you finish using the keli, and you had in it pistachios, and now you have peanuts, and you have a keli that's empty. You fill it up with something new. Pashat. Sha'ani yoimer eshtaket last year doesn't mean last year. It means in the past. Hoisa meleya peiros truma and achanami. When the label was written, it was accurate. There was truma in it. Upina. I love his word. He's not saying you ate it. You ate it. You changed utensils. You gave it whatever. You emptied it, and now you have an empty keli. And now you filled it up with new produce. Now, the Chachamim argue with Rabbi Yossi. It makes also sense because the Chachamim hold, people don't put, you say, I gave a bad example, according to the Chachamim. L'may nafkamina, if it's pistachios or peanuts, and v'oid, you'll see, you're not tricking anyone. But to have a keli with the label truma, the Chachamim hold, if whenever the balabas is going to fill it up with chulin, he'll take off the label. If it's engraved of it, he'll make a line through it. You know, it's why there's a logic to that also. Like, why wouldn't the person make the effort of changing the label? Now, Rabbi Yossi holds no. You're the balabas, you're the owner. Why would you be worried? You before you reach a certain age, you think you remember things. The guy says, if I know that the label is not shaykh, and you fill it up with chulin until you realize that your dementia began already 40 years ago, and you're going to forget. It takes the people a long time to realize that. All right. Moving on, a different topic, even though there's a similarity, all about finding something and wondering whether it's chulin or whether it's an item that has a certain type of kedusha, whether it's truma, whether it's meiser. So next case, ha'omer lebenoi doesn't have to mean benoi. It's just a diber hakasav b'hoiva. All right, diber chazal b'hoiva. A person tells the son, I want you to know that meiser sheni b'zav yezu, that I left meiser sheni. Your son comes to visit you. You didn't mark it. At least you're letting it be known. And you described what it is. Let's say I had 10 $10 bills. Meiser Sheni money. Be careful. That's Meiser Sheni money. So he knows the exact type of coin, the value of the coin, but in the corner, B'zav Yezu, the son goes into the house. He finds the exact types of coinage. He finds $10 bills. He finds that, but he finds it in another location. So here, two sides. Either, no, it's not in this location. Or it's exact the same amount. Maybe someone moved it. Okay. So the Mishnah says, Harei elu chulin. In other words, what is of consequence? Location. Now, as I mentioned in the intro, this can be taken to an extreme. But let's begin with the simple. No, since it's not in the same location, then the presumption is that money was used or put in another. The money that you found is different money. Says that Asherilio. He adds a line that's on the left column, 8 lines from the bottom. Says that Asherilio umeis oyholachloi. He's just being very practical. The father died. The father is not here. Because, let me word it this way. If you have access to communicate with the father, it's a very important rule, you're not allowed to rely on the Mishnah that this is other. Something that could be clarified has to be clarified. We don't always say that, Aviv. I'm saying a big thing now. Sometimes the Torah gives a chazak, and the chazak is a chazak. Here, it's not so pashut. When you don't have any other option, then you say that since it's not in the same location, it's not Meiser Sheni. But if you are able to be mevared it, you're chayiv to be mevared it. Okay, now, let's go to you found it in the same location, but there's a different quantity. The father spoke about amana, 100 dinarim, ibizav yezu, in the northern western corner, and in the northern western corner, the son or someone else found 200 dinarim. See, people think because there's different sides. What's the din? The din is not that since it's a different quantity, all of what you found is chulin. We don't say that. We say the 100 dinarim that the father said to his son is there, it's still there. Someone put another 100. Now, that other 100 is taka chulin. But 100 in the mixture is meiser sheni. That's the Mishnah's papsak. Hasha'ar chulin. Very important. In other words, 100 of the 200 remains. Again, what's the chiddush? What would you say, Aviv? You can say that. I'll tell you a cute story. I remember. Again, these are my Girsa the Yankees. This I heard before my bar mitzvah from one of my teachers that beat me. He said like this: that Shabbos Aveda and Bava Metzia, everyone was. I was probably 10 years old or 9 years old. That someone found a wallet, and in the wallet, let's say there was 100 cruzeiros. These are the old name. Today it's in Brazil, different name of the currency. Then it was cruzeiros. So you find $100 in it, and he announces it, and the guy says that I lost the wallet, and I left $200 in it. So the guy who lost the wallet, he goes to a Rav and he tells the finder, not only you have to give it to me, but you owe me 100. The Rav says to the guy that found it, you keep everything. Why? Because the Rav says, I believe you and I believe you. I believe you that you lost 200. I believe you that you only found 100. Since you found 100, is araya, you didn't find the wallet that this guy lost. That's not what we say here. What we say over here is it's taka not the same amount, but it went to more, not less. So what we say is that the original remains, the added is chulin, but the original is still meiser sheni. Now let's go in the other direction. If the father tells the son, or a person tells us chaver, I left in the north and eastern corner 200, you go to that same location. The location is consequential. The location is like the most important. And you find 100. Again, one might have thought, like in my joke, he was just making a point. How then the guy admitted, taka, I only lost 100. He wanted to get his money back. So you can say, oh, it's not the same amount, so it's different. We don't say that. We say the 200 is meiser sheni. Someone removed 100, but that which remains is still the meiser sheni. It's consistent. So we say hakoil meiser.
Rabbi, I can ask a question?
Yes.
I think we learned this already, but I'm not remembering. If I have a certain amount of meiser sheni designated, and let's say I lost it, do I need to replace that?
So what we learned before...
Yeah, I know I have 100, and now it's gone. Do I have to take another 100 and say, this is going to replace that one and then use it?
I don't know. I don't know the answer. I do know that we learned about this, not in your case that you're asking. We learned about this when I sold something, and I forgot to tell the buyer that what I sold to you is meiser sheni, and no pidyon was made. So now I know that someone out there has produce of meiser sheni without knowing it. So what we learned is that it's ideal for me to take money and for me to make a declaration that wherever that food is, it should be, that's what you are referring to.
So that's kind of where I'm going here.
I know. In other words, what the Gabbai is saying is that why don't we say a better solution? Why don't we just say the father left 100 dinarim, you take 100 dinarim, and just make a declaration wherever that money is? The answer is you don't have to do that. You don't have to do that. No, the psak of the Mishnah is that location. If the same amount is in another corner, chulin. If you can't ask the father. If you are in the same location, even though there's a different amount, more or less, what we say is that what the father said was there is still there, and either something was added to it or some of it was taken out, but the remainder is meiser sheni. And nothing needs to be done. Nothing needs to be done.
So to what you just said and your previous joke example,
yes.
Let's say you go to this quarter, I go to this quarter, and instead of 100 denarim, I find 50 denarim.
Yep.
The 50 denarim are presumed to be meiser sheni.
That's what the Mishnah is saying, Vlad. It's a chiddush, correct. The chiddush is that without the Mishnah, one might have argued none of it is Meiser Sheni, because the 100th was Meiser Sheni. Someone took it. Someone took it. Why did he take only half?
Correct.
Who do we know that would find money that will take half? Then is the Zajac? Okay.
Also, have to be that the ultimate time is 100 or 100, or there was such coin that was.
Oh no! So one second, Akira is saying good. If the coin was a $250 bill with Trump stamped on it, and you find now $100 bill, I don't know from our Mishnah whether you say that is Meiser Sheni. We're speaking there is that you had 200 freaking denarim, you had 200 pennies, and now you have 100 pennies. To say that someone exchanged the currency, first of all, outside Yerushalmi, we already learned you can't exchange it down. We learned that you can only exchange it up. You can make it into, from copper to silver, from silver to make more out of less. So you now to schlep it is more work. You're not even allowed to do that. Okay, says the Gemara. So let's first go to the beginning of the Mishnah that we learned yesterday. The Kol Hamois Hanam Tsoyim says the Mishnah Hare Elu Chulin. Now, guys, I know we learned the Marafulda, and we're going to get back to that. It doesn't mean Mamish Kol Hamois Hanam Tsoyim always everywhere. We already learned from the Marafulda that if you find money in Yerushalmi, which means the old city, during the time of Regel, different. Roiv of the money in Yerushalmi then was Meiser Sheni. The Mishnah is speaking about either Kol HaMois Hanam Tzoim or 365 outside Yerushalmi, or Kol HaMois Hanam Tzoim in Yerushalmi, other than the Zman of Regel. During what I just mentioned, the majority of the money is chulin. That key is that you follow roiv. So the Mishnah paskind that the money that you find is chulin. The chiddush was, even if you found a pouch that had in it gold, silver, and copper. I know that we have no idea what it is. We have bills. So for us, like, what's the chiddush? It's a big chiddush. During the times that people used gold or silver or copper coins, they would normally not put them together. They would not put them together. You know when they would put it together? If they were all Meiser Sheni. People always kept their Meiser Sheni separated from the rest of their currency. So that is some sort of indication that it's Meiser Sheni. That's why the Mishnah was Machadesh, even if you had Dinrei Zav and Dinrei Kesev and Dinrei Ma'ois, which means Nachaishes, we still say Harei Eluchulin. The Gemara is speaking out what we just said. What's the afilu? What's the chiddush? Shaloi Taimar, don't come and say, since it's not common practice for people to keep non-sanctified money of different types together, they did not do that. They had separate pouches for gold, silver, or copper. So that in itself might indicate that Yehei Sheni. For that the Mishnah says, no, that it's chulin. Okay, now, and you know why, Aviv? Now that we learned the Mishnah today, because let me go on the other side, if indeed it would all be Meiser Sheni, you know what this person would do? They would take a shard, today that would mean a little sticker, and they would put it in the pouch and write on it Meiser. Now that's what we get from the later of the Mishnah. People would mark their money that was Meiser Sheni for themselves, not to forget. So there is mitzad echad, you have a svara, the coins are together, Meiser. Okay, let me give you an opposite logic. The fact that there is no label is araya that it's chulin. So one logic cancels out the logic, and now we go back to the roiv, and the roiv is chulin. That's the way we learn in the Mishnah. Daf mem gimel amid beis. How beautiful. Now, hamoitzi keli v'kasav olav. And so first we had, like we mentioned already twice today, the machlekes Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim, when you have the whole word spelled out. Later in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yossi Bechlal argues with that. But then the Mishnah went, what happens if you have a single letter? And the Mishnah gave you a pshat of every letter. Not Rabbi Yossi, the Tanakama or the Chachamim told you that Kuf means Karbem, Mem means Meiser, Dalad in our Mishnah meant Demai, Tes means Tevel, and Tov means Truma. The Gemara is going to bring a braisa, Tanei, Hamoitzi Keli, because of all of Achuli. We're going to a single letter. So there's going to be a braisa, not Rabbi Yehuda, not Rabbi Yossi, like the Tanakama, but not like the Tanakama. This braisa, this Tana, gives another understanding of these letters. And let's go, Tanei. Whether you have the letter Aleph, and the letter Dalid, Dalis, right? Right, because it's poor. Goimel Dalim. Ches, or the letter Tes. Listen to this. Reish, Taf. Aleph, Dalit, Ches, Tes, Reish, Taf. All of these 6 letters, says the Braisa, they all mean the same thing. Truma. How do you get there? How does it work? So the Gemara, that's the end of the Braisa. The Gemara teaches. Aleph is number 1. Kadmaisa. The first. Which separation is the first separation of if? What's the question on that? What's really the first separation? Bikurim. But that's not the first time he spoke about it. Bikurim is only for the Shivas Haminim. It's a different type of category. If a person did not separate Bikurim, you can't say that the produce is usher to be eaten. In other words, the lack of Bikurim separation does not create tevel. So it's a different type of category. So therefore, we interpret Aleph means the first, which is Truma. Dalid, Dalis, means, here like I mentioned, Dimua for the record, not the Babli. Dimua in the Braisa means Truma, not a mixture, not Meduma. What? Milayascha v'dimacha loisa acher. Look inside Rashi, Mishpatim. Dimacha means Truma. So Dalid stands for Dimua, which means Truma. Yes. Kol Spellboy. The Torah writes that you have to give the choicest of your produce as Truma. You have 100 apples. You're separating Midah Beinanis. What 2 apples do you separate? The beautiful 2 apples. Spellboy means the fattiest, the choicest, the best. So Ches was another letter that was used in reference to Truma. Tes means Tuvai. Tuva means, again, it's best. Not Lashon Hapasik, right? What's the expression? Divrei, the words of the pasuk is one. The words of Chazal is different. The Torah calls it Ches. We call it Tes. Reish is the beginning, like Aleph. And then we're going to not take Goyres Mem, because the whole point of the Braisa is to put together all of the 6 letters. And Trof, at least you have over here, equal to our Mishnah, that Trof means Truma. So that's the end of the Gemara's interpretation, why all of these letters, Aleph, Dalet, Ches, Tes, Reish, and Trof are Truma. Back in the Braisa, if you have the letter Beis, here it's Veloshan Rabin, Basin, that means Sheni. Interestingly, not Meiser. It means Meiser Sheni. Why is Meiser Beis? That's what Sheni is. 2. Simple. That's why it doesn't say Meiser. It says Sheni. Right? If you have a pay, also means Sheni. Why? What is the only Meiser that is subject to Pidyon, pay? Meiser Sheni. No other tithe is to be redeemed. Can't redeem Truma. Can't redeem Meiser Rishon, nor can you redeem Meiser Ani. So the pay stands for Pidyon. Pidyon means, now, I don't know if it means it's subject to Pidyon or this is actually redeemed. This is the substitute for. But whatever it is, it has the Kedusha of Meiser Sheni. Stam Lahoyer, that in Ksavashuris, inside a pay, you have a base. And Kevin can find a picture online. Inside, you know that Aviv, inside the pay, if the pay is written in the Sefer Torah the way it should be, you're going to have the white in the black. It's going to be a base. My Rebbe told me pay is the mouth. What belongs in a Yiddish mouth? The Torah. Bereshis bara likim. That should be what's coming out of your mouth. Yud or Mem, both of them, says the Braisa, means Meiser. Now Mem is Meiser. We have in the Mishnah. How is Yud Meiser? Because Yud is 10%. 10% is Meiser. Like I mentioned, why doesn't it mean Meiser Rishon? Maybe it's Meiser Ani, because when you have a question, which type of Meiser are we referring to? We're going to say it refers to the Meiser, which is stricter than the others. Stricter in the content, in the context of, not only is it Ben Adam Lachaveda, it's a Ben Adam Lamakim. You can't eat it outside Yerushalmi. Now, when you have inside on a utensil, you have a label, it says Meiser Ir, The Meiser of a city, what do you think it refers to? It means coins that were used to redeem Meiser Sheni. In other words, it means that its coins are mugdash. Go eat it in the city. Meiser Sheni, money. What happens if you have a label on a keli and it says l'shem Yosi, l'shem Shimon, lahalois la'oichlem b'Yerushalayim? So now, what do you think it means? Doesn't mean it's Meiser Sheni. Even though it's written lahalois la'oichlem b'Yerushalayim, if it would only be Meiser Sheni Aviv, you wouldn't write l'shem Yosi, l'shem Shimon. The fact that you wrote l'shem Yosi, l'shem Shimon, it means that there were people that designated money to be used, let's use our verbiage, in a fabrengen. You know where you would get the best bang for your buck? In Yerushalayim. Because since everyone brought Meiser Sheni money to Yerushalayim, and everyone needed to spend it on food, all of the food vendors, you know where they would go sell food? In Yerushalayim. So when a person designated $100 to go buy food, it would be advantageous to everyone to do that fabrengen. It's chulin food. Go do it in Yerushalayim. So we understand that if the person is simply labeling the package that it's Meiser Sheni, he would have written Meiser. Why would he add L'Shem Yosi, L'Shem Shimon? L'Shem Yosi, L'Shem Shimon gives us an understanding that it's money that was designated to have it with others. And that was a common thing. You know, Shushvinus, it was a common thing. People spend money on the Kiddush with the understanding that next week you'll spend money on the Kiddush. The other week, the third guy. But they want to have the Kiddush in a certain setting. What's the best setting to have a fabrengen in Yerushalayim? Ani Oimer, that's the Gemara. Because I am interpreting that even though part of the label is Lo'achlam Yerushalayim, but if it would have been Meiser Sheni, you would have only written Yerushalayim or Meiser. Why are you adding the names? That Siboiliya Asu B'neihem. They made a joint fund. They made an agreement that every now and then they're getting together. And they're going to spend the same amount of money. But if you're spending the same amount of money, you have to know where to use the money. The best place to use the money was in Yerushalayim. So they wanted dafka, if I spent the money in Yerushalayim, Yossi, so when Shimon, when you spend the money, don't go buy money in Beitar, because we're going to have a shvacha fabrengen. You're going to get less bang for your buck. How amazing is it that Yerushalayim was the best place where to buy food? That means you would get the biggest variety, and you would get the best bang for your dollar because everything was there. Why was everything there? Again, all of the vendors brought their foods there because everyone came there with Meiser Sheni money. So there was just a lot of everything. When there's a lot of everything, that everything becomes a bit more affordable. When there is a shortage, things become more expensive.
But then the reason they wrote Meiser was to bring it to Yerushalayim. Then why would they write Meiser? No.
They didn't write Meiser. They wrote L'Shem Yosi, L'Shem Shimon to eat it in Yerushalayim. In other words, it was a common practice. No, Meiser Ir is before that, a different stanza. Meiser Ir means money of Meiser Sheni. Exactly. The moment you add people's names, then you say it's chulin. Even
yeah, so when you have both, it's chulin.
When you have both, it's chulin. Thank you.
Then why would...
By the way, not both. If you have the word Meiser, the Braisa never said it's chulin. If you have to eat it in Yerushalayim, which is not explicit Meiser, if you have names of people, then we say it's chulin. Weiter. Now, let's go back to our Mishnah. Rabbi Yosi argues, not only does he say that if there's a single letter, the single letter can just mean the first letter of someone's name. More than that, says Rabbi Yosi, that even if you have the word Meiser spelled out, the word Truma spelled out, yeah, that when the food last year was inside the container, you wrote the word Truma. But you know what? That food was already eaten. Now there's new food. The Gemara wants to know, Aviv, what were to happen if the food that you find in the container is old food? Because maybe Rabbi Yosi can only say it if there is fresh fruit in the container. So you can say, maybe you wrote it a year ago, and you see the food is fresh. What happens if you open up a container? Let's go to wine, and it's a year's old wine. If the wine is already a year old, so maybe Rabbi Yosi will agree with the Tanakama that this is from the original wine, and therefore it's Meiser. The Gemara says no. Even here, Rabbi Yosi will argue. You know why? Because you can buy now old wine, and you can put your freshly bought old wine in the container. Rabbi Yossi says that I interpret the label to mean but Upina, you removed it and you didn't take out the label. Why would you have to? So it says the Gemara at Kedoin, Rabbi Yossi's opinion is the easiest to understand if the current contents in this container are new contents. It means they're fresh. However, says the Gemara, what about Yeshanois? So what? Maybe Rabbi Yossi will agree. Says the Gemara, no. Even here, he'll say the same thing. Just because its contents are old, it doesn't mean they were always here. Could be you bought old contents. By the way, I gave a mashal of wine. The older, the better. But even if you bought old food, so you bought cheap food, you bought old food. You go to a bakery, buy yesterday's Danishes. So what? You pay a few dollars less, and you get the same caloric. You get all of the benefits from the Danish. Elama, it's not so tasty. Big deal. Ani Yomer says the Gemara, same thing. Yesterday you had truma and upina, and now you filled it up with old. Replacing something with old is taka not American, but so what? There's nothing wrong with old. So says old men. Okay, now the Gemara is going to bring a raya that indeed this is the din, the biggest agada to be get over here. That what? The Rabbi Yoina, the Rabbi Yossi, these are two Amoraim. This is not Rabbi Yossi of the Mishnah. Right? We know Rabbi Yoina is an Amoira. Rabbi Yoina and Rabbi Yossi have a shutfim bigarbaya. They owned in partnership barrels of wine. It's good to know, guys. Rav Mana, the Amoira Rav Mana was Rabbi Yoina's son. And during a certain time, Rabbi Yoina passes away. So Rav Mana knows whatever my father owns, I'm now the heir. I'm the Yoirish. Doesn't know for sure what was belonging to his father, what was a partnership, what perhaps only belonged to Rabbi Yossi. That's the balagan that happened. So Kad Demach, Rabbi Yoina, when Rabbi Yoina passes away, and now Rav Mana is the Yoirish. Amar Rav Mana le Rabbi Yossi. Listen here. Kol Grav, any barrel, the Chsiv Bey Rabbi Yoina, that you have Rabbi Yoina written on it, that means that the contents belonged to my father, which means it belongs to me. So Rabbi Yossi told him, what are you talking about? Yeah, I was a partner with your father. Last year, the contents of this barrel belonged to both of us, or maybe even only to your father. But just because your father's name is written on the barrel doesn't mean that its current contents still belong to him. However, now it fully belongs to me. Rabbi Yossi claimed the wine for himself. And what's the raya? So the Marafulda says, since we did not differentiate to the age of the wine, why wouldn't Rav Mana tell Rabbi Yossi, wait, I'll accept your argument if the wine is new. So you can argue it's new wine, but the old wine should be mine in partnership. He couldn't argue that because even if there is currently old wine, who says that the old wine is old? Could be the old wine was purchased right now by Rabbi Yossi. He bought old wine and he currently put it in the barrel and he didn't change the label. And you know what? He doesn't have to change the label. So the Yoirish had no proof. Weiter. Now the Gemara is going to bring a case where even Rabbi Yossi, the Tana Rabbi Yossi, will agree to the Chachamim. You won't say, Aviv, that the contents are new contents. You know when you say that? If the word Truma is written on the seal, and like now, seals on barrels are single use. So if on the seal you had the word Truma, what are you going to tell me? You can't. What are you going to argue? That there used to be Truma. If there used to be Truma and you took it out, that means you broke the seal. If you put a new wine, you put a new seal. You wouldn't write on the new seal Truma. Matzah migufasai. If you find bim migufasai, if you find the word Truma in the seal, or meiser, hareo kozol meiser. Even Rabbi Yossi will agree that it's meiser. Okay, let's chaparaim. We have another minute. So the Mishnah spoke about location. Danny, I'm doing this just to give Danny a little bit of a. So you have location. Asks the Gemara, listen to the case. You have a box, Aviv, and in the box there was a wallet. And let's go, there was a black wallet. And the black wallet had 200 zuz. and it was in the north and eastern part in the box. You tell your son in the north and eastern, in the black wallet, 200 zuz meiser. The son opens up the box. In the same northeastern corner, he finds a white wallet with 200 zuz in it. The Mishnah said location is consequential. It's in the same location. On the other hand, come on, if it would have been the original, it would be in the black wallet. So that's the doubt. If you find in the same location, the same amount of money, but in a different wallet, what will be the halacha? Answers the Gemara Daf Mem Dalid. I will resolve it from a Mishnah and Beitza, like we mentioned in the intro. That you have to designate birds to shechtem on Yom Tiv. You're allowed to shecht on Yom Tiv, but you have to resolve the muksa by designating them. What happens if Zimun Shchoidim? If you designated black doves before Yom Tiv, you go back to your dove cut and you find white or white doves and they become black. That will be the proof. By the way, the din will be is that they're the muksa. If the fact that the wallet changed colors, come on, I don't care, same location. But let's read the whole Mishnah. What happens if you designated 2 doves and you find 3? So you know what we say? You know what we say, Aviv? We don't even have to say that all 3 are new ones, are muksa. Even if the 2 original ones are here. But what happens if a 3rd gets mixed? Can you say bittul by living animals? No. So whichever way, all 3 are asur. But on the other hand, if you designated 3 and you only find 2, then it's mutter. Point is that white, black, black, white, that is a raya that it's not the same. And therefore, even though it's in the same location, but if it changed, the wallet changes color, it's not the same.